50-year-old Tammy Sellers Holland lived in Randolph County, North Carolina in 2014. She worked as a waitress at Elizabeth's Pizza on Liberty Drive in Thomasville for over a decade. Tammy lived alone in a mobile home on Laughlin Hill Road. On October 28th of 2014, after noticing her car was still in the driveway when she normally would be at work, neighbors went to check on Tammy. There was no immediate response. When neighbors later returned to the house, a dog appeared in the window, which caused the curtains to move. Neighbors then spotted Tammy on the floor and called 911 just after 2 a.m. Officers who arrived on the scene confirmed that Tammy was not alive anymore. The autopsy revealed that she had been stabbed multiple times. Detectives interviewed the neighbors and collected forensic evidence from the crime scene. Unfortunately, no useful leads presented themselves and the case went cold. Co-workers and hundreds of customers who Tammy served throughout the years said that her not being there anymore was a loss that left a hole in the restaurant and a hole in their hearts. The community put together a memorial for her. The front counter was filled with pictures and displayed an apron belonging to Tammy. At the time, manager Gino DePorto said, "We feel like we want to pay some respect to her. We want to make sure everybody knows we miss her." DePorto added that Tammy was a great, great person who was like family. She was here every day, happy, had a good personality and never got mad. Always respected everybody. Loved the cooks in the back. Always worked together with the cooks and never took a day off unless she was sick. On February 7th of 2023, 50-year-old Roy Lee White was arrested on charges of a felony accessory. It was determined by detectives of the Randolph County Sheriff's Office that White's wife, Florence Elizabeth Keene, was responsible for taking Tammy's life. Keene and White lived near Tammy. Florence Keene passed away in 2018. White gave investigators a detailed breakdown of how Keene committed the crime and how he helped. Unfortunately, details have not been made public regarding a motive and what led investigators to Keene and White. Roy White is currently in the Randolph County Detention Center and was given a $60,000 bond and is awaiting his first appearance in court. Sonia Carmen Herok Stone was a 30-year-old single mother living with her 4-year-old daughter in Monterey County, California in 1981. She worked as a merchandiser and sales representative for Levi Strauss & Company. On October 15th of 1981, a friend of Sonia, Caroline McBride, knocked on her front door. When Sonia didn't answer, McBride made her way inside. It was then that she found Sonia's partially clothed body sprawled on the floor of the living room. She had been strangled with a pair of pantyhose. Several pieces of DNA evidence were collected from the crime scene by investigators to be used later. Investigators decided to make a timeline of the crime. They believed her life was taken while her young daughter was at school. It was around noon when her body was found. Soon after the crime took place, a man told investigators that he had a friend who admitted to being inside Sonia's house the morning that her life was taken. The friend's name is Michael Glazebrook, Sonia's neighbor. A day after the crime occurred, investigators decided to interview him. They saw that he had a scratch on his face and was extremely nervous. On December 18th of 1981, he was arrested in connection to the case. In 1983, he was tried, but the jury could not agree on his innocence or guilt. Prosecutors dropped the case following a mistrial. In the early 1980s, DNA evidence was a long way off. Blood was found under Sonia's fingernails, but lab technicians could only tell that it did not belong to her. In 2020, investigators decided to re-examine the case. They tested the DNA evidence they had collected back in 1981 all over again. They were then able to create a DNA profile. Because they still believed Michael Glazebrook was involved, they collected his DNA sample. After some more testing, it was confirmed that Michael Glazebrook is responsible for taking the life of Sonia. 65-year-old Glazebrook was arrested at his home in Seaside, California in August of 2021. He worked as a school bus driver, which is just absolutely terrifying. Glazebrook found himself in the Monterey County Jail, where he was held in lieu of bail set at $1 million. Michael Glazebrook was convicted of the crime on February 8th of 2023. He is scheduled for sentencing on April 26th, when he faces a sentence of life in prison without the possibility of parole. Mary Prieur and her husband Leonard lived in Flint, Michigan. They owned Sweet Marie's candy store for many years before selling it. They then moved to Lennon, Michigan to retire. In 1990, Leonard passed away. In the years since his passing, Mary became a fixture in the small village. She was a devout Catholic and often attended church functions. Lennon residents remember seeing her walk from home to the town diner for lunch and dinner most days. On February 27th of 1997, Michigan State Police K-9 teams taking part in training in the area found 88-year-old Mary's body in a wooded area near her residence. She had been beaten, strangled, and assaulted. It was a crime that shocked the small Lennon community. Investigators collected DNA at the crime scene that belonged to the suspect. They also conducted hundreds of interviews to gain evidence in the case and followed up on dozens of leads. Quickly, they zeroed in on Michael Burr. He lived in a residence a short walk from Mary's house. He was in the 11th grade at the time. Investigators took his DNA sample so it could be stored, as DNA was not advanced enough at the time to confirm that his DNA matched what was found at the crime scene. Unfortunately, investigators could not gather enough evidence to meet the probable cause standard necessary to charge him in connection with the case. Recently, the Genesee County Police Department partnered up with the Michigan State Police Crime Lab to finally help solve the case. In November of 2021, they were able to match the DNA found at the scene to that of Michael Burr. Genesee County Prosecutor David Layton said that DNA evidence shows 1 in 1.9 octillion chance that Michael was not responsible for what happened to Mary. Ultimately, what we want here is closure for the victim's family, he said. We want closure because when you lose a loved one in such a brutal manner, it never goes away from your mind. You never have a peaceful day when you can stop thinking about it. Michael Burr was then held in the Genesee County Jail without bond. He had a probable cause hearing in Genesee County District Court on November 24th of 2021, where prosecutors laid out the evidence against him. This case was wrapped up on February 3rd of 2023, when Michael Burr was sentenced to 10 to 20 years in prison. Genesee County Sheriff Chris Swanson had this to say after the sentencing. Although Mary was not related to me by blood, my family grew up with her. I was assigned this case as a young detective sergeant, and 21 years later, here we are. When you see people come forward and allow families to have answers to questions, especially in such a violent case like this is why we clip the heels and take the oath. This is why we become police officers and investigators, he added. Although I don't have the same relationship that the family behind me has with Mary, Mary's my family and it's a great day.